Simon Ekpa, the Prime Minister of the United States of Biafra, appeared at the Pyhäjoki District Court in Finland to begin his official trial. He was represented by his lawyer, Carl Gomera. Prosecutors presented a signed July 2023 document allegedly issued by Simon Ekpa, ordering mandatory sit-at-home compliance in southeastern Nigeria. It included threats and demands to market leaders and oil firms. Simon Ekpa's lawyer denied the document's authenticity, claiming it may have been forged and not issued by Simon Ekpa. However, prosecutors showed it was published from Simon Ekpa's verified Twitter account. Prosecutors accused Simon Ekpa of founding and financing a social media platform called Freedom Stream, allegedly used to spread false information and incite violence. Simon Ekpa's lawyer argued Simon Ekpa had no control over user-generated content on the app. The prosecution countered that negligence is not a legal defense for harm caused by one's platform. A tweet from October 2024 showed Simon Ekpa promoting Freedom Stream. This was used to establish his active role in its creation and promotion. Prosecutors accused Simon Ekpa of using social media to promote terrorist activities and support insurgency against Nigeria, citing analytics from his Twitter showing millions of engagements. A USB-linked tweet allegedly urged Nigerian soldiers of southeastern origin to defect and defend the motherland. A linked phone number was said to belong to Simon Ekpa. The prosecution presented a photo of a WhatsApp message to the implicated number seeking help for fallen members of a USB army, implying Simon Ekpa's direct involvement in organizing militant activities. Simon Ekpa's lawyer remained defensive, observing the evidence rather than aggressively refuting each claim. The trial continues on May 27, 2025, with expectations of more direct challenges to the prosecution's evidence. The courtroom drama surrounding Simon Ekpa, a controversial figure known as the self-proclaimed Prime Minister of the self-declared United States of Biafra, took a major turn on May 26, 2025, at the Pyhäjoki District Court in Finland. What happened inside that Finnish courtroom wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was the beginning of what may become one of the most significant political and legal trials connected to a separatist movement in modern African and European history. Let me walk you through the story, every step, every twist, and every strategic move as it unfolded. Simon Ekpa is a name that has stirred emotions, headlines, and debates across Nigeria and the Nigerian diaspora. A former athlete turned lawyer who later declared himself the Prime Minister of a government in exile called the United States of Biafra, Simon Ekpa has become a lightning rod in the conversation about self-determination, nationalism, and how digital activism borders on or crosses into insurgency. For months, authorities in Nigeria and even in Europe have accused him of inciting violence in Nigeria's southeast through online platforms, commanding mandatory sit-at-home orders and encouraging civil disobedience. Now he stands trial, not in Nigeria, but in a Finnish courtroom, in a quiet district court, far from the region his name has been most known. On the morning of May 26, 2025, at exactly 10:55 a.m., Simon Ekpa was escorted into the Pyhäjoki District Court in Finland from the Kilmakoski Correctional Center, where he has been detained. He was accompanied by his lead attorney, Carl Gomera, a Finnish-based legal expert representing him through these proceedings. The courtroom was tense but orderly. Simon Ekpa appeared composed, knowing well what was at stake. This was not just a personal legal battle, it was a test of whether his actions, which he claims are lawful political expressions, could be criminalized in a European country that values freedom of speech and digital rights. The proceedings kicked off with a major piece of evidence, a document allegedly signed by Simon Ekpa in July 2023. This document, submitted by the prosecution, was a public declaration calling for a mandatory sit-at-home protest across southeastern Nigeria. It wasn't a mere suggestion. It reportedly used the language of enforcement, including direct threats aimed at market leaders and oil companies. It called on businesses to cease operations under threat of retaliation. Carl Gomera, acting quickly in defense, disputed the document's authenticity. He asserted that the document might have been forged, or at the very least, not issued directly by his client. But the prosecution responded with evidence that shifted the courtroom's atmosphere. The same document had been posted from Simon Ekpa's verified Twitter account. This digital trail became the center of the prosecutor's argument, showing not just publication, but endorsement. The government's legal team, representing Finnish and possibly Nigerian interests, went further. They accused Simon Ekpa of creating and funding a social media platform called Freedom Stream. This platform, according to their claims, served as a hub for spreading misinformation and promoting violent rhetoric. It was likened to platforms like YouTube or Twitter, but allegedly used with a more militant agenda. The prosecution presented screenshots and digital records, including one key tweet from October 2024. The tweet from Simon Ekpa read, "Breaking, the game-changing USB app about to hit the App Store." The prosecution argued that this showed he was not only involved in the platform's creation, but also proud of it, actively promoting its launch. Carl Gomera, remaining calm and methodical, argued that Simon Ekpa could not be held responsible for what other users posted on the platform. He emphasized that the app had moderation protocols and that Simon Ekpa had no real-time control over user-generated content. But the prosecution responded with a compelling legal principle. Negligence is not a defense in matters of public harm. If your platform enables harm, even unintentionally, you bear responsibility, they argued. Things intensified further when the court was shown digital analytics from Simon Ekpa's Twitter profile. Over 5,500 tweets, more than 226 million views, around 20 million user engagements. The data, the prosecutor claimed, demonstrated the massive influence he wielded. These weren't passive numbers. They represented a communication network powerful enough to mobilize thousands of people, sometimes with violent consequences. Then came the most dramatic moment in the day's hearing. The prosecution introduced a tweet from an account affiliated with the United States of Biafra. The tweet allegedly encouraged soldiers from southeastern Nigeria to defect from the Nigerian army and defend the motherland. A phone number was included in that tweet, and prosecutors claimed that the number was previously registered to Simon Ekpa. To back this up, the prosecution presented a screenshot of a WhatsApp message sent to the same number. In the message, someone was pleading for help, saying that members of the so-called USB army had been killed and others were being hunted. It painted a dark picture, one where Simon Ekpa was not only a voice in the digital wilderness, but a central coordinator in a militant network. Carl Gomera challenged this assertion vigorously. He pointed out that there was no conclusive evidence linking the number to Simon Ekpa. The message could have been sent to anyone, and the tweet came from an account that wasn't officially confirmed to be Simon Ekpa's. Still, the prosecution responded with what seemed like an intelligence leak. The WhatsApp message had been photographed directly from a screen, suggesting the phone, and perhaps the person behind it, was being monitored or had turned informant. If the phone was indeed Simon Ekpa's, the image could be devastating evidence. Throughout the hearing, Karl Gomera maintained a steady, calculated presence. He advised Simon Ekpa to remain quiet and observe. This session, it seemed, was more about understanding the scope of the prosecution's evidence than attempting to dismantle it immediately. Karl Gomera's approach appeared to be, let them lay their cards on the table now, and we'll prepare our real defense later. By the end of the hearing, it was clear that this was no ordinary case. This was a high-profile, high-stakes trial that straddled national security, international law, digital freedom, and human rights. The Finnish court was not just being asked to judge whether Simon Ekpa broke Finnish laws. It was being asked to rule on whether his digital activism and alleged militancy has crossed the line into criminal behavior. The trial resumes on May 27, 2025. That session is expected to be far more aggressive, possibly featuring direct rebuttals from Simon Ekpa's legal team. They will likely begin to challenge the technical details of the digital evidence, raise questions about the credibility of the informants, and argue that Simon Ekpa's speech, no matter how provocative, falls within the boundaries of legal political expression. What happens next could define the future not just for Simon Ekpa, but for diaspora-led movements around the world. Can a government in exile be prosecuted as a terrorist organization if its methods are digital and its leadership resides overseas? Can a tweet, a video upload, or a social media platform be equated with an act of war? And for the millions of people across southeastern Nigeria who have either supported, opposed, or simply endured the effects of the Biafra movement, this case might offer something rare: legal clarity on where activism ends and violence begins. For now, all eyes are on Finland. A quiet northern courtroom has become the unexpected stage for a story that touches the deepest nerves of identity, governance, and justice. We'll continue to follow this case as it unfolds. The truth is still on trial, and the courtroom drama is far from over. As the morning sun filtered through the quiet streets of Pihajoki, Finland, tension was already thick outside the courthouse. It was May 27, 2025, day 2 of the criminal proceedings against Simon Ekpa, the Nigerian Finnish political agitator, digital broadcaster, and self-declared Prime Minister of the United States of Biafra. Inside the courtroom, what had begun the day before as a methodical unpacking of digital evidence now turned into a fierce legal brawl over international law, human rights, and the ethical boundaries of online activism. Today's session was anything but procedural. It was sharp, technical, and deeply political. Simon Ekpa sat stoically beside his lead attorney, Karl Gomera. His demeanor remained unchanged, calm, slightly distant, as though he were watching the trial of someone else. But his legal team knew the stakes were climbing. If yesterday was the prosecution's opening shot, today was the real battle over whether Simon Ekpa's online actions amounted to legitimate political dissent or criminal incitement with cross-border consequences. The prosecution wasted no time. They opened the day by drawing parallels between Simon Ekpa's messaging and the escalation of deadly violence in Nigeria's southeast. They presented time-stamped social media activity, tweets and live streams from Simon Ekpa's verified accounts that coincided with incidents of violence in the region. Particularly emphasized was an August 2023 tweet calling for a defense lockdown in Enugu state, warning that violators would answer to the Biafran people. Shortly after that tweet, there were reports of roadblocks, attacks on civilians, and forced business closures. The prosecution argued that these were not coincidences. They claimed that Simon Ekpa's words were instructions, not opinions, and they were carried out by followers who believed they were taking orders from a leader, not just reading the thoughts of a social commentator. The prosecutor even described Ekpa's digital broadcasts as command posts in disguise, comparing them to wartime radio used to galvanize underground militias. It was a bold accusation, but Karl Gomera stood up and delivered a strong counterattack. He turned the conversation away from Nigeria's political conflict and brought it back to European legal frameworks. He reminded the court that Finland is a democratic country that protects freedom of speech, even controversial speech. "We are not here to judge Biafra's political cause," Gomera said, his voice deliberate and unwavering. "We are here to judge whether a Finnish citizen broke Finnish laws." He then began to dismantle the evidence piece by piece. First, he challenged the timeline connecting Ekpa's tweets to the alleged incidents of violence in Nigeria. He presented news articles, time-stamped WhatsApp screenshots, and expert testimony, arguing that much of the violence in the region occurred without any centralized command, and that pro-Biafra armed groups operated independently, often fracturing into rival factions. Gomera's point: Simon Ekpa was a media figure, not a general. Then he went after the digital evidence itself. In a moment of sharp legal maneuvering, he questioned the validity of the digital analytics presented by the prosecution. He asked whether the views and retweets attributed to Ekpa's posts could be verified as human, citing the increasing use of bots and fake accounts in modern information warfare. "You cannot convict a man based on social media impressions alone," he argued. "This is not how justice works in a democracy." The court listened carefully, but the prosecution wasn't done. Their final evidence of the day was perhaps their most provocative. They played a short clip from a live stream recorded in December 2024. In the clip, Simon Ekpa was heard telling his audience, "If they shut down your businesses, don't be afraid. The time for fear is over. The Biafran army is watching, and they will not forgive betrayal." The prosecution argued that this was a direct endorsement of violent enforcement, but Gomera pushed back hard. He argued that the clip was edited out of context and that the term Biafran army was metaphorical, a common expression used by supporters to refer to the collective resistance of the Biafran people, not an actual military unit under Simon Ekpa's control. Still, the courtroom fell silent for a moment after the video. The gravity of Simon Ekpa's words was undeniable, even if their intent was still in dispute. By the time court adjourned that afternoon, it was clear. This trial is not just about documents and tweets, it's about interpretation. The prosecution believes Simon Ekpa's online activities were deliberate acts of incitement that had real-world consequences. The defense insists that he is a political dissident using lawful digital tools to fight against what he believes is tyranny. But the deeper question looming over the trial is whether Finnish law, and by extension European law, can be applied to transnational digital activism that influences violence in another country. Can someone in Finland be held accountable for unrest in Nigeria simply because they posted online? This case may set a precedent. Outside the courthouse, a small group of supporters held up Biafran flags. Some came from nearby towns, others drove for hours. One man, who declined to give his name, said, "Simon Ekpa is not the enemy. He's the voice of the people Nigeria refuses to hear." But inside the courtroom, Finland's judicial system is trying to answer a harder question. Even if the cause is political, even if the pain is real, does that justify the call to arms, especially from thousands of miles away? The trial continues this week. More witnesses are expected to testify, including digital forensic experts, former Nigerian security officials, and possibly even individuals who once operated within Simon Ekpa's inner circle. If even one of them directly connects Ekpa to the coordination or funding of armed groups, the case could shift dramatically. But if the defense continues to cast doubt on the reliability of the digital trail and successfully frames this case as a test of free expression. The court may have to tread carefully. For now, Simon Ekpa remains in custody, awaiting the court's next move. The outcome could redefine how Europe handles politically sensitive digital speech that reaches beyond its borders. Stay tuned. The next chapter is coming, and the courtroom in Pihajoki may soon become a landmark in global legal history. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.